Welcome back to the HubScale podcast, the podcast where we dive into the minds of cybersecurity leaders all around the world. On this week's episode, we have a very special guest. We have Jason Clark. Jason is the Chief Strategy Officer at Cyera. Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Amazing. And Jason, for the listeners who don't know who Jason is, obviously everyone's seen in the market over the past 18, 24 months the growth of Cyera, CyberStarts, and the successes of Netscope. But it'd be brilliant to just have a bit of an introduction into yourself and your background.
Yeah, I've done, kind of grew up as a military brat, as they say, and grew up all over, traveling the world with my parents, and was actually born in Germany. And then at 17, joined the army myself, and I've done nothing but cybersecurity. Back then, we just called it signal intelligence in the military. But since 17, that cybersecurity has been my entire life. And then left military life and joined kind of because when you have the combination of having leadership skills and having, the deep technical IT and security skills, it was quite easy to land leadership roles, running security teams and architecture teams and network teams. And so by 26, the CISO title was just starting to appear up because of major breaches of kind of credit card related breaches. And I got my first CISO job at 26 years old at the New York Times, because of a breach they had. And so I was their first CISO. Uh, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 26 years old, but I knew how to put a plan together and lead people. And then a couple years later, got with a Fortune 100 at the time, called Emerson Electric, and was a CISO for them. And kind of that's my background of the CISO life, and then made the transition to the business side because I saw that the only path was to either go and be a CIO, which is kind of like, okay, if you're a CISO, you're a CISO for life, and you just jump around every 3, 4 years, or go be a CIO. And I kind of got turned on to go to the business side. And so, done was the chief strategy officer at Force Point Web Sense. That was where I really learned the craft of strategy and business strategy, go-to-market strategy, product strategy, marketing, and then got to be, one of the creators of Optiv, which is the largest security reseller services team there. Ran a bunch of different things there, and then got to create Cyber Starts with Gilly, which we can talk about more, which is, doing a lot of special stuff for the industry there with, kind of taking a very different approach about how to create companies. And then joined Netscope full time, and was, from very early days as their chief strategy officer and also CMO, ran marketing there. And then also ran security as well. And then now just joined Cyera less than 5 months ago as their chief strategy officer, chief marketing officer.
Yeah, it's such a interesting background, especially for a lot of the folks who just love the industry and have been within the industry for so long. I'm sure you probably didn't even need to give an introduction into yourself. They must have heard your name or some of the work that you've been doing over the last 20 or so years. I can imagine the role of the CISO itself has changed so much since when you came into it, as you said, as it was just in its infancy back in 2005, when you joined the New York Times, and just how the industry in itself has developed so much over that past 20 or so years.
Yeah. It's been a fun journey to watch it. And I'd say many of my best friends are all CISOs. It's like we've grown up in this industry together, and we've watched all the changes, and no doubt that now CISOs are much more business leaders, right? Versus technical leaders. And that's the you know at the time when I made the change of saying I don't want to do the CISO thing over and over again, it was because it was very much just an IT technical role, with a C level title in front of it. And more to just be able to help you get things done in the company, right? So people would you could drive change. But that being stuck in that technical mindset was the driver of saying, hey, I want to become a business leader. Um, and I think that many of the CISOs have definitely, it's wildly different, but also, I mean, the exposure, the news, I mean, security in general, not just the CISO role. Security is significantly different, and we have it's the kind of the future domain for war, right? It's the way that these businesses, I mean, everybody's under attack, and um, it's what nation states see as being able to have another angle to attack versus having nuclear weapons. So it's the whole thing's changed. And I remember it used to be cybersecurity. Nobody even knew what it was when I told them that's what I did. Right? They're like, cyber what? In fact, when I walked in the New York Times boardroom and we talked about cybersecurity, they didn't even know what a CISO was. They didn't know what cybersecurity was. And I had to, explain all that. Now, the nice thing is everybody knows what it is and everybody thinks it's really cool and wants to learn more about it.
Yeah. No, amazing. Amazing. I think there's quite a lot of different topics that we're going to go through today. Not just about your recent move to Cyera and what's so exciting about the organization, but also, like you said, the unique career path that you've had from CISO through to business leader to chief strategy officer. Talking a little bit about strategy and then diving into hiring and principles that you've carried throughout your career when it does come to bringing world-class
Mhm.
talent into your team. So I guess going, I guess rolling the clock forwards to the past 6 months. In April 2024, you announced that you joined Cyera as the chief strategy officer. Um, First question, why Cyera?
So I looked around of what I wanted to do next. I like to be in the beginning part of building an organization that can solve a very, very big problem. So that's an important thing for me. Kind of that when I joined a company called Accuvant, that we turned in by, you know, a bunch of investment into Optiv, and joining Netscope, it was, and then Cyera, it was all really big problems that needed to be solved in the industry. And so that's a foundation number one. And when I looked at what the biggest problems are out there, I kept landing on and talking to, you know, my best friends out there and probably 100 CISOs of what do you think the biggest problem is? And the majority of everybody said data security is the number one problem that we've not solved. It's the least mature domain in all of security. It's very fragmented. And there's fundamental questions that we can't answer. And it's like that's the reason security exists for the most part is because of data security. We call it cybersecurity now, but it was really called information security for most of my career. And and so when you looking at that, asked the question, well, why hasn't it been solved? What's there's got to be a fundamental problem and flaw here, and came to the conclusion by breaking out the creation of data to the destruction of data and all the controls and the data flow and the visibility and everything we're trying to do as a business and as security, came to a very simple conclusion that is if you don't know where your data is and you don't know how important that data is and the value of the data, the liability of the data, the sensitivity of the data, and the criticality of that data to the business, then you can't all the other downstream stuff that the business is trying to do around either leveraging that data or protecting that data becomes very, very difficult. And nobody can answer some fundamental questions of where all is your data and how important is that data and what are the risks to that data. They might be able to do in certain pockets of environments with a lot of work, but at scale, nobody in the world's ever done that. And so discovery is, again, I'm using kind of the security terms that we use is discovery and classification is the foundational, you know, thing that had never been done. It's like we tried to build these skyscrapers on sand. So for data security, we'd build we never really had a platform because everything was like 2 and 3 story buildings because we never learned how to build a foundation that could go to 100 stories. And so when I, met the founding team at Cyera, Yotam and Tamara, I was like, wow, they get it. And they've proved that they can do this and they can solve this at scale and precision of classification. And once you can do that, there's 100 things you can build on top of that. And that's a really fun strategy job of trying to figure out the complexity of them. I mean, this is a complex problem, but also the sequencing of the options and which bets do we make and how much do we invest in those bets there's a lot of learning that needs to be done because this is new domain. But also, most importantly, I believe that this is probably the biggest place I could make the largest impact to the community and to the world. And so that's why I came here.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I think because obviously having the affiliation and obviously as you said, being part of that founding team of CyberStarts, coming through Netscope, Accuvant, Optiv, I can imagine you weren't short for options of where to go and where you could have an impact. So being able to choose Cyera so confidently, I guess, is a big stamp of approval for the potential of the business and what they're going to achieve. I think data security is interesting as well because obviously it's not like it's a brand new category of security either. It's been around almost one of like the legacy areas of cybersecurity for so
Mhm.
long across the backup space and DLP and so on and so forth. So what is it specifically that Cyera is doing differently than the
Mhm.
other vendors that have been in this marketplace for a while?
Yeah. The first, everybody else that's been around has been around for most everybody, right? Has been around for quite a long time. And so it's legacy technology doing it and trying to solve it from without the latest and greatest technologies. One is just, the architecture. But second is without AI and LLMs, it wouldn't be possible to do, I would call the most important differentiator of Cyera, which is the precision of classification. You can take, I tell people all the time, I've been leveraging and was part of DLP companies for much of my career and been leveraging DLP for, since it was invented. And, it's the accuracy's just always been a massive challenge. And so that when it's inaccurate, it creates a lot of work downstream. Um, of false positives, and then people have to look at all that stuff. And then what happens is you water down the policies because it's just too hard to leverage, and that's why DOP many times got a bad name. And so the accuracy, the precision of using an LLM. I'll give you a very simple analogy or example. If you wrote on a piece of paper, the CEO writes their M&A strategy. We're gonna, you're a public traded company. We're thinking about writing down, and you draw on a whiteboard. We're looking at acquiring these 5 companies. These are the options. This is why we'd acquire them. This is what we'd be willing to pay. And you took a picture of that and you sent it to me. Um, what would happen is you'd find that no DLP would catch that, but you took a picture of that and just sent it to our LLMs or to send it to ChatGPT 4, it'll tell you, hey, this was like a confidential document around strategy. You're talking about M&A of these companies, and then you can prompt it. What are those companies valued at? What's their revenue? What's their profitability? What's their differentiators? You can do all that, inside of an LLM. So being able to add that extra context is game changing. So precision is number one. Second is speed, the speed of being able to scan the data. And third is scale, the ability to do that with, we've got a customer that's, got 360 petabytes, right? I mean, the scale is a big factor that's where everything else started breaking. So each of these, many companies, all of these broke. But if you can nail the accuracy, the speed, um, and then ultimately kind of that have that more coverage and depth than everybody else, and do that in a cost affordable way. You then have a foundation that can be built on. And so that ends up being kind of the differentiators here. And the last one being more just a grand vision
Mm.
of truly looking at this thing from a business context of once I know your data, what else can I do to enable the business and to help chief data officers? And that's what security teams dream of, is not just protecting the data, but being able to help the access to the data in a faster way to enable the business to ultimately take more risks, right? Do business in China if needed, make an acquisition faster, do divestitures faster without thinking and worrying about the data that might be leaving with that divestiture, and being able to respond. You know, I'll give you one like an example. Putting all this together, if every company I talk out there, I ask the question. I do, 100 people at an event or 20 CISOs or CIOs at a dinner. I say, if 200 of your executives' OneDrive got compromised right now um, by ransomware, would you know what was embarrassing in those OneDrives? What was regulated? What would you need to inform to your customers or to the regulators? What contracts did you violate? What's customer information? What's employee information? That the salaries of all your employees is probably in somebody's OneDrive because they download it to Excel. Would you know what's material, what you need to inform any regulator, SEC, or customer? And everybody's answer is, oh, we wouldn't. I've never had anybody say we'd know right away. Never, not a single company. And then it's like, well, how would you go about that? Oh, we'd restore from backup. Okay, then what? Well, then we'd bring in a bunch of high cost professionals, outside counsel and Big Four, and we'd spend $3,000 an hour times a lot of hours per one of those executives' drives with e-discovery, probably 90 days and millions of dollars, likely more than you'd even pay for the ransom to know the material impact. And what if you can do that in a day, right? I already know the answer. That's game changing.
Mm.
And so that I'm using this scale, speed, precision differentiators in a life example that happens to companies every day.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think when you marry up that technology with the level of talent and not just at a leadership level, but throughout the organization that Cyera has managed to attract over the past 18 months into the business, the scale of the opportunity and where that company could go, I think is without limits, really, isn't it? As to what can be achieved.
But that's it. That's the kind of the exciting thing. I think that's a lot of what I see are the people that are going on the journey with us, the the CIOs and CISOs and security practitioners going on this journey with us. That's what they see. They see, hey, this is just the beginning, right? But the beginning is the most important part. It's I talk about strategy with CISOs, and invented with a team a strategy offering at Optiv that was a lot of fun. Where it was like, okay, you don't need to spend a month doing strategy, analyzing and paying $500,000 or somebody to come build your strategy. We can come do it we can come do it in a week, because and have it pretty much spot on, kind of the 80/20 rule. And the first step is know thyself and strategy, right? And well, know thyself is know the business and know the data you're protecting. And that's like the step that I find security teams actually skip over, and they go to the other steps of strategy, but not kind of like Sun Tzu out of war, like just know thyself, then know thy enemy, right? We go know thy enemy first in
Mm.
security.
Yeah, yeah. I think that brings us on quite nicely. Obviously, we wanted to go through, I guess, the diversity of your background. I know you mentioned at the start of the recording that you were the first CISO at the New York Times. Walked in, nobody knew what a CISO was, and always kind of had to carry that shield on your back really from day one. Um, like you said, came into Emerson as a CISO. and then was part of the, I guess the WebSense Raytheon Forcepoint team.
Mhm.
Um, how did you transition from the CISO world into the strategy world, and what advice would you give to CISOs wanting to follow the same journey?
Yeah. So I had a good CIO that I worked for, who was also jumping to the business side and, kind of saying, hey, why do I want to go be a CIO again for the fourth time, at some other company? Because he himself was also a builder and a transformation person, not an operator, right? And that's what I see myself as like to build and transform companies. And then build things and then hand them over to the like kind of my analogy is I like to design the car and then hire the people that run the factory to build the car. And I like to be out, talking to the customers about their experience and selling the car. Don't like to live in the factory. And that's the operating people. And kind of with that, I first got my executive MBA, and I had some amazing professors. Went to WashU. One was on strategy, one was on marketing. Those two professors, they really jumped out at me. I was like, wow, these topics are super cool. And something sparked in my head and said, what if I could be a strategy officer um, that was an expert in cybersecurity? Meaning I know the problem, I know how to protect, but I also then can, so I can advise CISOs on strategy and I can advise CEOs of cybersecurity companies on strategy and be an expert in the world at that. That was something clicked in my brain during my MBA. And at the end of my MBA, I was advising the CEO of WebSense, and the CTO of WebSense. And it was about just some transformational changes that they needed to make because they had some significant threats to their business. Mainly Cisco was coming in and was going to just disintermediate them with a change in the firewall command and say, why do we need to use for you for the, this URL filtering database? We can just do that ourselves. And I helped them design and come up with the kind of the web proxy and DLP. And at the end of kind of that kind of design partnership with them, they said, Jason, why don't you come be our strategy officer? Like, help us not only on the product side, but help us now retrain the company and marketing on how to communicate and message this significant different thing where now we're a network company versus, in the end, they were mostly a porn filter company. And that's a big change in marketing and sales and it changes the whole company, even in support. Um, and so I was hired to report to the CEO and do that. And that was kind of that big moment for me. And the way I learned strategy by actively doing it then. And then um, Joanna Flowers was the CMO there, and later she became the CMO for CrowdStrike when they just started. And she taught me marketing, and she kept saying, "Jason, you're a marketer. Realize that strategy and marketing go together in the biggest brands out there because it's all about understanding and knowing the problem. And if you can know the problem better than anybody in the world by talking to them all, and you used to be one of them, you've lived it. You've gotten the 3 o'clock in the wake up calls way too many times. Then you develop your strategy to solve those pains. And then marketing is the next step. You have your strategy, and marketing is now how to create the brand awareness and you communicate in the messaging that then sales goes and takes and closes deals with. And that's that cycle. And I kind of quickly, the light bulbs went off after many people said, Jason, like, you're a marketer and you're a strategist and you're a security person. Like, just do all three. And it's been the best thing that's the best thing that ever happened in my career was that first job where I learned all that and everybody was telling me that stuff. And then I got to apply that at every company I've been at and continue to just learn more and more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Almost feels like you've had to kind of pioneer throughout your career certain roles and I guess break out of what is typically expected or break out of the mold for certain things. So no, it's really interesting. And are you finding these days that because obviously completely, I guess, completely there that having a CMO or a CSO, Chief Strategy Officer, who has had experience in the end user side is super critical or super beneficial is probably the better way to put it. When you can actually, when you've lived and breathed the pains of the customer, to really understand it from their perspective. Um, what advice would you give to other CISOs who, like you said, maybe are a little bit finding maybe their career step is becoming a little bit monotonous and a little bit repetitive, and they're
Yeah.
thinking about new options, but they don't want to take another CIO, CISO role. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe in that position that you were at one point?
Yeah. I one, I think that, almost every CISO I talk to says, I don't want to do this forever because it is a very, very hard job for many reasons. And so I do see this like automatic, like, oh, I want to be on boards, which I've done boards. I don't actually, I'm on no boards now because I don't, uh, there's things that are good about it. There's things I don't like about it. There's this default to CISOs thinking that's their next step in their career, which I think is a mistake. Um, because there's only so many of those board jobs, and I think there's a lot of other value that people can bring that they're not thinking about. And I think that some of them think about going to Big Four and being a consultant, et cetera. There's a lot of good options. I think being a chief strategy officer is like I tell people, I think it's one of the best ones because you have to understand the business for a cybersecurity company. Like that is a perfect job for a strategic thinker that knows the problem. And yes, to answer your question, I think to be a really awesome strategy officer, you have to understand the problem. I mean, your job is to understand the problem better than and the pain and the potential solutions to that pain better than anybody else in the company. And you have to think, tactically and strategic at the same time and go 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet. And I think CISOs naturally are always doing that. They're flying strategically and they're having to land and be in the SOC to deal with an incident. So they're well equipped for it. And I think many more should, and a number are starting to do this. You see, Mike Towers just did it, Karthik just did it as well. Leaving AT&T and DirecTV, and Mike Towers left Takeda. But there's a good list of people that are becoming chief strategy officers. I think it's a great path. And then I'll tell you the natural thing after that, people will say, why don't you take on marketing? Because when I want to figure out how to message something, I just ask 20 CISOs I know.
Hmm.
It's not like the answer's in them. And they already know. And I talk to so many CISOs all the time, like, you're a natural marketer. Like the way you just articulated exactly how our sales team needs to talk to you is brilliant. Like you are a marketer. Now, and I'd say it's a major advantage to not be a classically trained marketer. Um, it, by knowing the problem, it's a absolute advantage. The negative of strategy or marketing by not being a classically trained one, where that's what you've done your whole career, is that you have to get the support of your people. And at first, before until you have the experience, everybody's like, okay, well, why is a CISO or the CMO or the chief strategy officer now? Like, when you're leading people that have done it for 20 years, right? There's a natural, so you do have to learn fast, right? But once you've done it once, and I think a CISO can learn anything because it is one of the hardest jobs out there, that's very doable.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say if you could pinpoint one of the biggest challenges, or if you've got maybe a story of the one of the biggest challenges or I guess barriers to entry that you faced as you were transitioning from the CISO world into strategy or marketing, what would you say it was?
I think that it's painting the vision, um, number one, in a way that everybody else understands. So a lot of times, too often, I'm 5 years ahead, and it's a lot of work to bring it down to a level that the engineers will understand. I often talk about risk and how our product needs to, be communicating at a risk level and do some calculations and likelihood times impact, et cetera. And I find that I'm not taking them on the journey. So I think that visualization of a strategy and communication of a strategy is extremely important. And there are secrets to that. Um, and so that's you have to learn them. And you have to have people around you that can also dumb things down. Like I wrote a couple of dummies books, super hard. Because I'm already way off, like ahead, and you've got to dumb it down so simple. And that's not the easiest thing to do when you're a super strategic thinker. And the second, thing I'd say is on marketing. So that's the strategy side. The marketing one had a bigger challenge. Um, there's two aspects of that challenge. So first is I really didn't want the CMO title. It was forced on me, and for a good reason. But I was a chief marketing officer without taking the marketing title for quite some time because I felt it would that my friend, the community, the CISOs out there, would look at me differently and be like, "Oh, you're now sales and marketing." Like, "Oh, it's all like they're just like generally there's this anti-marketing thing in the security community because a lot of people are, over saying that they do stuff they don't do. Most products out there actually are smoke and mirrors and don't do what they say they do out of the thousand. The good ones do what they say they do, but most don't. And I was like, gosh, I struggle. That was a hard one. And as soon as I took the CMO title, all of a sudden, I didn't get invited to the same circles anymore. So that was hard for sure. And the next big hard part of marketing was, I mean, it's demand gen. It's core to the business. You're creating pipeline. You're reporting to the board, and the pipeline and how many, and leads is a leading indicator of the success of the company for the next year. And your mistakes are very visible, right? And so, that's the fun part, but also that's a challenging part for people is learning the demand gen side. The product marketing stuff, the messaging, CISOs are natural for. Um, but the demand gen that's the harder part to learn in a way. But once you do, you've got the whole package.
Would you say that the demand side was the hardest part of marketing that you needed to pick up?
I would say for most people, it's actually demand gen. Most marketers they start as demand gen, and so they just get it. Um, no demand, like I knew all the places that we needed to go, all the best conferences, all the best mediums to be on. So that wasn't hard. Um, Product marketing came natural to me because I got product and I got the messaging. I think it's the opposite for most people that are classically trained marketers. They're good at demand gen and harder is the product marketing. But for me, it wasn't like how to drive demand. It was more understanding the entire funnel of the importance and understanding the measurements of conversion. And it's very scientific, right? Of, creating awareness to lead to getting a meeting and the conversion rates that are expected then get a meeting to a second meeting to getting pipeline to getting a POC and then conversion rates to a POC to a closed win. And what are all the things that marketing needs to do in between? And which is marketing is in every single aspect of that, but also being able to communicate the value of marketing. People try to zero in and say, the ROI is, what percent attribution of marketing of all of pipeline or all of sales comes from marketing. That's the wrong way to look at marketing and the wrong way to measure it, but it's the easy button for most boards. So to learn to communicate the value of all the investments you're making, which aren't just doing conversions of meetings to pipeline, um, is a hard part that I think many CMOs haven't struggled with.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the strategy side of things, I know that you defined kind of six clear strategy steps for CISOs and CEOs if you as you've been doing a lot of advisory work and
Mhm.
board work, and obviously through cyber starts and just throughout your background. What are those six key strategy steps that you have for CISOs and CEOs?
Yes. And I designed this, it's not my invention. Um, it's designed with a couple CISOs, one in particular. And then we've just kind of been iterating, and I've shared this now in front of, I mean, one-on-one with hundreds of CISOs, hundreds and hundreds, and probably over 10,000 people in large audiences. And people, everybody's like, wow, like they're all writing it down and they take pictures of the slides, and it just works. And it's saying, all the other strategy stuff are kind of frameworks. This is more a principles, right? And if you ask yourself how you're driving this, first, know thyself, right? Know the business, know your data, um, and then know and your vulnerabilities to the data, right? So the posture. Um, and second is minimize the attack surface to that, to those, right? Third is complicate unauthorized access. Fourth is rapidly detect, respond, and contain incidents. Fifth is align basically all that to the business, right? And operational excellence as you do that, and kind of wrap all that with continuing to innovate, constantly changing because you have an active adversary, right? So that's kind of a wrapper around it all. But you do those, you can look at everything you do in cybersecurity and align it to those principles. And people should. They should say, what are all my projects? What am I doing? And how good am I at every little thing? And I'll just use data security. How can you be good at minimizing the attack surface to your data or rapidly detecting, responding, and containing an incident if you don't know all of your data or you haven't classified all that data and know how important it is? And the answer is you're actually extremely ineffective. That's why data security is the least mature domain, because we didn't do that first step. Know thyself.
Hmm. Wow. And how long have you been implementing that, and what's been, I guess, what was the initial feedback, and have you evolved it at all, or?
Yeah, you know, the the know thyself was implemented as an adder, but started with minimize the attack surface. And multiple people say, hey, don't, shouldn't we know the business first? Shouldn't we know our data first? And that kept coming back as feedback. And I'm like, you're 100% right. So it didn't start with know thyself. Um, it started with minimize the attack surface as the first one. And the know thyself kind of was an additional, and then that innovation wrapper. And I'll use that. That came with cyber starts. The the kind of talking to lots of CISOs that are building innovation budgets for themselves. We're saying, hey, we need to have some amount of money on the side where I can go take risks. I can be a design partner and work with companies to design a solution to my problem, to what's unique about my business, and versus kind of just getting product pushed on you and trying to fit it. And so this innovation component is something we have to do at every element, is constantly improving and learning how to innovate. So that one was also an adder. Again, that came from all the work we did at CyberStarts of spending a lot of time with CISOs and trying to just design solutions to their needs, right? Which is what's unique about the model.
Amazing. And we could talk for another, I'm sure, probably hour, 2 hours about different steps and different parts of strategy and so on and so forth. I'm conscious that we're coming up towards the end of the podcast. Two questions from my side that I wanted to ask before we kind of wrap everything up. First one being, what would you say is the one single best piece of advice you've been given throughout your career?
Um, Always be putting your job on the line, or you're not doing your job. and that is as a CISO, uh, and as a marketer and as a strategy officer, because you have to take risks. You have to be willing to put it out there. Like, guys, I think like do something that's not just in the what's expected. And I have a story around it. If you, we were doing an M&A, I was at that very large company, and we were doing an M&A, a carve out, and I stood up and was like, "There's no way we're doing this. This puts us at way too much risk." And I got pulled into the CEO of this really massive Fortune 50 and the CEO of my company, and I had to then present, and it was I thought I was like, "Oh crap, I'm in trouble." Like I just caused a big problem by saying, "There's no way I'm signing off on this." And I got a phone call from after getting called into the office of the CEO of this other company, because I was visiting them on site. I got a call from my leadership saying, Jason, great job. And I was like, hey, I was a little worried. And the answer was, if you're not putting your job on the line and not standing up for what you believe, you're not doing your job. Right. And I think that's really important, especially for CISOs who are being pressured to, well, accept this risk, accept this risk. They need to be able to stand up and say, um, I'm not okay. I'm not okay signing off on that. They need to have confidence in themselves. And worst case is what happens? They go get another job.
Mm. Yeah, amazing. And one final question that we always ask at the end of every podcast on the Hub Scale series is if you could go back to Jason at 21 years old, fresh out of college, and
Mhm.
you could give him one piece of advice upon reflection, what would it be?
I didn't graduate college until like 25. Because I did the military first, which I think actually, by the way, was a major advantage for me. By the time I got out of the military, by the time it was like 21, 22, my friends were just getting out of college. And I was already making 4 or 5x what they were, right? I was already 4 years ahead of them. Um, so that was actually, I'm not saying nobody should go to college, but for me that worked out to my advantage. Um, myself, look, I'm gonna give you two things. One, I love the quote of you never regret the things you did do, you regret the things you didn't do. So do more things, try more things, uh, you know, and do it earlier. Don't wait till you've got the money and the retire. Like I tell people, spend. Like go have fun with it. You do it before you're too old to enjoy it. And so as I don't believe people should just be saving, saving, saving. So that's one for myself. Go do more things, take more risks. Second, this is the bigger one. Learn how to scale myself. If I think that's the hardest thing to do as an executive is is scaling yourself. And that's many ways, right? There's a lot of aspects to that, but that's an important thing is leverage in your own model, right? Like, and then just like you're a business, you need to get leverage in the model. And you can be the smartest person in the world or the best person in the world, but if people aren't following you or if people don't know, um, then it's really not valuable, right? You need people to know and you need people to follow you so that they can go in the direction of what you're saying, and that is learning to scale yourself.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on today. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We might have to do a 2.0. And yeah, we'll see you around. Thanks so much.
Awesome.